Hello, Helldivers, and welcome to this mandatory report from the Super Earth Equipment Testing Division. Our operatives joined the Terminate Front for this test on Polaris Prime for a defense campaign. Over the course of 10 missions, our operatives tested the following loadout. Operatives were specifically chosen who were compatible with the SA-25 Steel Trooper armor set, and were granted access to the standard-issue G-12 high-explosive grenades to take advantage of their augmented strength. Additionally, they were equipped with the ARC-12 Blitzer electric shotgun and the CQC-30 stun baton. In the way of stratagems, our operatives were granted access to Eagles loaded with 110mm rocket pods and 500kg explosive warheads. Additionally, their super destroyers were capable of launching 380mm barrages. Helldivers also brought the AC-8 autocannon as a support weapon. Let us now turn to a statistical analysis from our super intern.
Thank you, sir. I just returned from field testing where I was actually able to get my hands on part of the loadout. I was able to get my hands on the Blitzer, the 500 kg, and the 380 barrages. These are considerably difficult to acquire for anyone under the rank of cadet. The ARC-12 Blitzer is currently the only energy-based shotgun in the Helldivers arsenal. It acts similarly to the Arc Thrower or the Tesla Tower. Speaking of which, if you want to know any information on that sentry, please turn your attention to report number 4. The Blitzer is a great crowd manager. Acting like a shotgun, its arc trails spread to cover both ground and air. However, this brings forth a disadvantage as it's still a shotgun. You want to be closer to your enemies rather than shocking a Helldiver. However, this brings forth a disadvantage, as because it's still a shotgun, you still want to be close to your enemies. At least you want to shock a Helldiver with your impressive aim. This weapon unfortunately doesn't chain through enemies, but instead packs the punch of an arc thrower. I ran the loadout through a bug mission, and due to the shotgun elements of this weapon, I found that it instead stuns enemies hard in their tracks. It can stun hunters, brute commanders, and even bile spewers. It's a great flex for the Blitzer. Another great flex for the Blitzer is its AP rating coming in at a level 3, meaning it can stun and kill medium armored enemies. It can tear through the smaller bugs, and on that front, it is essential. This weapon has the advantage of being an energy-based weapon, thus having unlimited ammo. This weapon is great for those who don't necessarily want to keep an eye on the ammo. Cedar reminds Helldivers that in order to use this weapon, you must have access to the War Bond codenamed Cutting Edge. This can be purchased with issued super credits. The Eagle 500kg bomb is an offensive stratagem that relies on the Eagle, a strike craft that rains liberty and democracy from the skies. It is one of the most powerful explosives in the Helldivers arsenal as of this report. This stratagem boosts an AP rating of level 7, or its official designation as Tank Level 3. It also sports a 25-meter shockwave radius, so, make sure you have some distance. This means that it can take down basically any type of enemy if aimed correctly, such as chargers or even impalers. You should note that this bomb is dropped at an angle and takes a few seconds before detonating, which can delay your killing a Bile Titan or an Impaler. Another great use for the 500 is that the fact that it can close bug holes. In fact, if you aim the beacon directly or correctly at a bug nest, you can close the entire outpost with one drop, saving you ammo and grenades. All in all, this strat is an exceptional way to kill bugs. If only there were a napalm version of this weapon. For our final stratagem, the 380mm high explosive barrage. It fires 5 salvos, with 3 shells being fired in 1-second intervals. Each salvo fires 2.5 seconds between each other, but Seeded recommends that Helldivers run as far as they can from the stratagem beacon once thrown. This barrage is the big brother to the 120 barrage, which has a considerably tighter area of effect. This is why it's recommended to run as far as you can, about 60 meters if possible, as the barrage has a wider area of effect than the 120 does. Thus, a recommended use of the barrage is to throw it at an outpost that's causing you a little trouble, run away, and come back to find it a little emptier than you left it. However, I would advise against using this stratagem as it runs the risk of higher friendly fire incidents in your mission report than intended. However, Super Earth does not claim any responsibility for misaimed shells. The destroyer simply saw something you didn't. That's all for now. I gotta get ready for my next mission.
Thank you, Super Intern. Your vote shall count double for your service to democracy. Let us begin with one of the more interesting items in this arsenal, the Blitzer. This weapon behaves similarly to the arc thrower support weapon, but with a shorter range and a lower ionization threshold, which prevents bolts from arcing between targets or having the same penetrative power. The Blitzer makes up for this, however, with its high damage and stagger potential against most lesser bugs, even having the potential to eliminate brood commanders and stalkers with a single pull of the trigger if aimed well. That brings us to reportedly the greatest downside of this weapon, however. Our operatives reported a learning curve when aiming with this weapon, with some even expressing the electricity must have been causing malfunctions with the aiming reticule portion of their heads-up display, due to the tendency of bolts fired from the Blitzer to arc past targets, even when fired directly at them. This was somewhat reliably circumvented by aiming one's reticule slightly to the left of an enemy. The other major downside of this weapon over a traditional shotgun is the slowed rate of fire. The Blitzer requires almost a full second to recharge between pulls of the trigger, which is incredibly detrimental when facing swarms. That is why most of our operatives opted to use the Blitzer in a support role to the autocannon. The autocannon is the true star of this algorithm-selected loadout, especially its flak rounds. Due to the low armor rating of a majority of Terminid targets, flak shrapnel is able to easily rip through massive groups of bugs at once with a decent rate of fire and accuracy. Additionally, it proved incredibly useful when dealing with airborne shriekers. With the flip of a switch, the autocannon could then be switched into an anti-armor round for taking care of larger, more heavily armored targets. The primary downsides of the autocannon in these scenarios are its reloading method and lack of operator safety at close range. This weapon's internal magazine has a maximum capacity of 10 rounds, and is reloaded via 5-round clips which are carried in a backpack. Due to this, Helldivers must become stationary in order to reload, which can prove incredibly deadly with the ever-advancing swarm over the next ridge. This can be circumvented by another Helldiver wearing the backpack in order to provide team reloads, allowing for both greater speed and movement, while keeping a constant rate of fire. Unfortunately, this fire proves to be a double-edged sword in close-quarters engagements, as the explosive nature of the rounds has the likelihood of injuring the operator or their allies. As such, it is recommended to use the Blitzer in these scenarios, or, more rarely, the stun baton. Helldivers found the baton to be a redundant member of this loadout, due to the Blitzer's lack of an ammunition requirement and ability to be used while retreating. The baton was most often used in scenarios where operators did not wish to accidentally injure a fellow Helldiver or evacuating civilian, though the lengthy deployment time left much to be desired. The same could not be said of the high-explosive grenade, however, which performed admirably as expected for standard-issue equipment. This simple device is capable of eliminating several targets at once and closing hive holes reliably. Overall, no complaints were heard, though often it was not needed as a result of the autocannon filling the same roles with greater speed and capacity. Another item without complaints were the 110mm rocket pods. These rockets are equipped with direct targeting technology, with an Eagle pilot aiming them at the largest target near the stratagem beacon. This makes them most effective when dealing with large, slower-moving targets, such as Bile Titans and Impalers, as well as Chargers if they can be held still for long enough for the strike to arrive. This stratagem is not well optimized for targeting hive holes, and the division would recommend using them for stripping the armor from and destroying large targets rather than clearing swarms. Much more effective for the above purposes is the 500-kilogram strike. This high-yield explosive can destroy massive amounts of enemies, as well as heavily armored targets in short order. The only flaw with this stratagem is its weight, which prevents an Eagle from carrying more than one of these explosives at a time before rearming. It is highly recommended that fellow operatives are granted sufficient warning to exit the blast radius before the bomb lands. The same can be said of the 380mm barrage. This powerful orbital barrage blankets a wide area with explosive shells, capable of destroying structures and heavy targets, with the caveat that these projectiles receive no direction beyond a general area of approximately 60 meters from the stratagem beacon. This unfortunately causes a barrage of such magnitude to constitute a greater obstacle to Helldivers than enemies of freedom, as the time it takes to possibly destroy or clear an objective is often far greater than it would be for operatives to conquer the problem directly themselves. It is recommended to use this barrage as either a distraction for enemies or to clear a portion of a large nest while handling smaller targets. Alternatively, it can effectively cover a retreat on occasion, though with the constant forward movement of Terminid forces, the effectiveness of this is middling. Turning now to mission averages. Over the course of 10 operations, our Helldivers racked up an average of 202 kills, with an average accuracy of 66.98%. Unfortunately, our mission suffered an average of just over 2 of our operatives lost to enemy fire, but less than 1 friendly fire incident on average was associated with this loadout. That brings us now to the EES score for this loadout. In the way of enjoyment, our operators voted for a score of 8 out of 10. While many were flawed, the individual pieces of equipment involved in this loadout were interesting for Helldivers to use in ways they likely weren't entirely intended. In the way of effectiveness, our analysts granted an identical score of 8 out of 10. The only portion of this loadout that was truly lacking in effectiveness was the stun baton, and analysts would have preferred to see the 120mm barrage used instead of the 380 for its more reliable nature. Finally, this loadout receives a synergy score of 7 out of 10. Operatives with this equipment selection function best as part of a team, picking off groups and medium targets from a distance, while allies squash the stragglers. That leaves this loadout with a total EES score of 23 out of 30. As the chief analyst of the Super Earth Equipment Testing Division, I would certainly recommend this equipment combination, though I would certainly recommend a different secondary weapon and orbital barrage. This concludes the 5th public report from the Super Earth Equipment Testing Division. Until next time, dive well and long live democracy.